The new Nintendo Switch 2 Pro controller doesn't veer far off the beaten path and sticks to a tried and true design, but that begs the question, why not just stick with the original Pro controller if you already have one? Well, you can, and you wouldn't miss out on too much if you're not swayed by the Switch 2's new features. But while I still have my gripes with Nintendo's official gamepad, including the jump in price, the Switch 2 Pro controller is still a well-built gamepad that does some things better than most, and if you mostly play docked, I would even call it an essential Switch 2 accessory since it's much better than the Switch 2 Joy-Cons in terms of performance and comfort. There isn't much to the package. You get the controller and a 5-foot USB-A to USB-C cable. I do wish it came with a longer cable, and so I've relied on a cheap 10-foot USB cable for my own setup. Wireless pairing is as simple as ever through the Switch menus, or you could just plug it into your console. There's no surprises here. Now looking at the controller itself, you'll notice some physical changes from the previous Pro controller, like the light gray accents of the analog stick mount and the top side parts. The body of the controller is made with a grippy matte black texture that feels good in the hands, avoiding the cheap plastic of lesser controllers that might creak or get slimy from usage. I do miss the rubberized material of the old one, but this isn't a bad alternative at all. It's a dense and durable controller that makes for a premium feel. One thing I'm not a fan of, which was kind of the case with the original Pro controller, is that the actual handles you grip to hold the controller are quite small, and compared to the DualSense or the Xbox controller or most third-party options, the Switch 2 Pro controller doesn't fill the palm of my hands quite right. These thinner handles help the controller keep a slimmer profile, but it's at the expense of proper ergonomics and long-term comfort, especially for those with bigger hands. Almost all the other fundamentals of the Switch 2 Pro controller are fantastic though. The B, A, Y, and X face buttons are large and balanced, feeling soft to the touch and responsive enough for rapid inputs. Perhaps my favorite aspect is the smooth analog sticks that have a consistent resistance along their full range of motion that I'd begrudgingly describe as creamy. Though my one gripe is that the RS and LS stick click inputs are a tad stiff, taking a bit too much effort to press downward. I did find the directional pad to be a slight improvement. Although it feels similar to its predecessor, I've anecdotally experienced fewer errant inputs since it's better at distinguishing the directions I was pressing, which is important for the many 2D action platformers that I play on Switch. The bumpers and triggers are light to the touch with an easygoing tactile feedback as you would expect from the Pro controller, which I really like. That hair trigger feeling of ZL and ZR is super responsive and works really well for games that frequently rely on them. However, it's disappointing that Nintendo still hasn't adopted analog triggers, which limits its versatility, and anything that has some kind of acceleration or pressure-based input mechanic is gonna need some sort of game-side workaround. The Switch 2 Pro controller brings programmable back buttons to a first-party Nintendo controller for the first time, which is a hallmark of many high-end gamepads. Marked as GL and GR, these back buttons allow you to mirror the input of any other button, giving you the ability to use face button actions, for example, without having to take your thumb off of the right stick. Although you can't map them through the controller itself, you can do so swiftly and easily through the Switch 2 system menus. You simply hold the home button and change the button assignments there by pressing GL or GR, then the button you want assigned. These assignments are also recorded on a per game basis for added convenience. Many third-party Switch gamepads have some form of back button inputs, but it's nice to see Nintendo incorporate them into its own controller this time around. Now, something as basic as a 3.5mm audio jack built into the controller seems like common sense, but only now do we have a Switch Pro controller with one. I'm not here to praise Nintendo for finally catching up to the crowd, but it does make using wired earbuds or headphones so much easier than having to use something with a long enough cable to reach your Switch when playing docked. There's one more new button on this updated Pro controller I gotta mention, and that's the C button that's on the bottom center. It pulls up the exclusive Switch 2 function, Game Chat. This button jumps you straight into the system's Game Chat app, giving you quick access to set up a chat room or configure its options. Those who plan to be more social in multiplayer settings with their Switch 2 will find this button much more convenient than flipping through menus to set up or fiddle with Game Chat, which you'd have to do if you're using a previous generation controller. Now, I gotta give Nintendo grief for this one though. You can't wake up the Switch 2 with a previous generation controller. It's a minor inconvenience, but just annoying enough to ever so slightly push us to buy the new controller, even if we want to stick to the original Pro controller. It's worth mentioning. Focusing in on in-game performance, it's a massive improvement over the tiny and rather unergonomic Joy-Con 2 with the packaged grip attachment. But beyond being a proper full-size controller, it's the little things that help it stand out. Those GL and GR back buttons come in clutch in several games with complex control schemes, such as Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom. Setting sprint to GR and weapon select to GL helps keep my thumbs on the sticks at all times, and in intense combat scenarios, the controls feel a lot less clunky. The same principle applies to any game with important actions set to the face buttons that also require right stick camera controls, and once you get used to relying on the back paddles in this way, it's hard to go back. As someone who's reviewed plenty of aftermarket controllers in the past, I've noticed that manufacturers often struggle to get the actuation on their back buttons right. But that's not the case here because Nintendo nailed the feel. They're easy enough to hit in the heat of the moment, and I never hit them by accident at any point either, since they sit flush with the controller's handles and they don't protrude or get in the way of a natural grip. I just press my middle finger inward slightly and I get a nice tactile response. I can't stress enough how buttery smooth the motion of the analog sticks feel, whether I'm whipping my cart around corners when drifting in Mario Kart World, or taking aim with a bow in Tears of the Kingdom before relying on gyroscope motion controls to fine-tune my shot. I'd even go as far as saying that I prefer Nintendo's design of their analog sticks over the Xbox controller and DualSense. And in contrast to the new Joy-Con, the difference is night and day, especially when it comes to shooters, which go from nearly unplayable to superb as far as gamepads go. So if you're playing Cyberpunk 2077 on Switch 2, for example, the new Pro Controller will serve you well. The big question that won't be answered by a week's worth of usage is how well or if Nintendo has addressed the threat of stick drift. Given that this new Pro Controller uses many of the same mechanisms as the previous one and hasn't adopted the increasingly common Hall effect design, which has been shown to be less faulty, it may be susceptible to the same wear and malfunctions over time, but time will tell. However, a week's worth of usage has told us how great the battery life is on the Switch 2 Pro Controller. It's roughly the same as the original, so I wouldn't necessarily call it impressive relative to what came before, but getting 40 hours from a full charge is more than plenty, blowing the DualSense out of the water and being a lot more convenient than Xbox's AA batteries or rechargeable packs. After playing Switch 2 games intermittently across 4 days, totaling roughly 20 hours, my controller battery was slightly under half charge, and leaving it plugged in for about an hour through its USB cable had it back to full charge. Since the Switch 2 Pro Controller is a standalone purchase rather than a pack-in with the console and costs $85, the expectation is that it has to be exceptional, and in many respects, it is. It's a premium product at a premium price, and if you mostly play your Switch 2 docked, getting the new Pro Controller would make perfect sense. You'll definitely want something better than using the Joy-Cons with the grip attachment that comes with the console, and the C button and the back buttons especially are reason enough to upgrade from my preferred Switch 1 controller. As third-party controllers become readily available over time, some may end up being more cost-effective options, but that doesn't take away from the new Pro Controller being a great and proven first-party gamepad. We have so much coverage of Nintendo's new console, so be sure to check out our review of Mario Kart World and peep our podcast called Nintendo Voice Chat, or NVC for short. And for everything else in the world of Switch 2, stick with IGN.